Chapter 11 by Sarah Pink. It's called Doing Anthropology Forward, Emerging Technologies and Possible Futures. So let's start with this one. When it comes to technology, if you're over in the engineering department or the business department or those places, what do you think about technology? Techno-optimism. So the idea is it's going to be wonderful because pretty soon we're going to be able to automate all these jobs. We're going to have automated systems. We're going to transform everything with the digital, and all the robots will be helping us out to do our work, and AI will be writing everything we need to write and thinking everything we need to think because it's smarter than us. So that's optimism. If you hang out in the anthropology department for too long, or other social sciences, you'll probably hear a lot about the societal wrongs of technology. Probably be not so into it. So most of the people who are drawn into the anthropology, sociology wing of life are probably going to be at least skeptical about these technologies. They're not so techno-optimistic. Now, what Sarah Pink wants to do is provide us with a real-world example of how this technology is being used. And she's giving us an example that we might not have thought about before, because most of our examples of this about the influence of, say, AI are with people who do knowledge work. So who's she going to be working with? That's a surprising example here. Construction work, like actual work, like the people doing this stuff. When I first read it, I was like, wow, that's going to be hard to do. And so what she's saying is that in this chapter, she's going to be looking at not the view from afar, but how people integrate technology into their lives. And instead of this big optimistic or pessimistic vision, we're going to have more realistic visions. And as she states at the very beginning, modes of optimism that differ from those of dominant techno-optimist narratives. So the idea here is we're going to have a mode of optimism, but it's not the same as techno-optimism. It's not the same as the idea that everything's going to be great once we get the robots in there. So she's going to be doing this through the idea of anthropology forward, which is for her more than just thinking about hopeful futures. So in some of our chapters, for example, maybe back when we think about Samuel Collins and when he was talking about Margaret Mead, the very first chapter, I would say that was more of a thinking about hopeful futures, a thought exercise, an exercise of how people were thinking about them. In Anthropology Forward, what she says is we're going to participate in imagining and constituting possible futures that we can feel optimistic about. So the idea here is that if anthropology could be characterized as participant observation, maybe some people are doing more of the observation of what people are thinking about, and this is more of the participant part of anthropology. She says that it is simply too late at this point to stand back and critique their very existence. So what she's saying is we are going to be together with technologies, and we can't say, oh, we'll just never have them. Actually, that leads to our next point, because in theory, we could just stop. If we're just sitting here studying, we could just say we can stop, but we actually have to be doing it. We're involved with the people who do it. And so again, Anthropology Forward is about how people actually use these technologies in their daily lives, how they emerge, how people improvise with them and change them from perhaps what they were designed to do. As we talked about, the example of this is going to be the construction industry. We're going to need to have a lot of construction. It's a very growing industry, but it's also the third most dangerous industry worldwide. So she mentions that she is part of this team called Auto Work. workers in transition through automation, digitalization, and robotization of work. So trying to put these technologies to work here. What she wants us to do is get beyond this idea of either simply techno-optimism or simply techno-dystopianism. So what she's saying here is that if you just believe that everything's going to be great, techno-optimism, or what she calls techno-solutionism, that's problematic. That's not going to work. Actually, techno-optimism and techno-dystopianism, everything's going to be great with technology, or technology is ruining everything. Both of those assume that techno-determinist perspective, that is, things that are imposed from the outside. So both of them assume that technology is either going to solve all our problems, or technology has created all of our problems. But in both assumptions, it's like we as humans have nothing to do with it. It's imposing itself upon us, and we don't know what happens. And so her point is that we already have the technologies. They are here with us. And the point is to figure out how to make them work, and the ones that will work in our lives. It's funny, when I met up with some college friends of mine back in 2019, like she said, that the self-driving cars were supposed to be here in 2020. And actually, these guys, they were San Francisco types. And they were convinced that the self-driving cars, because they were driving around San Francisco, and they're coming fast. And this one friend, he even had a job offer. It wasn't for self-driving cars. It was for the technological system that would help the self-driving cars communicate with each other. So they would never have to stop at an intersection. They'd know all the cars that were coming, and they could just zoom along. It sounded a little speculative. We don't have the self-driving cars yet, and you're supposed to get me in on the system that's going to communicate with them. So he was right not to take that job, because the self-driving cars aren't here yet. She says there was so much hype about them, but they are not likely to be here soon. What she says is, what the problem is with the self-driving car is it's a system that is entirely imposed from above. And so it's a system that it's being imposed upon you. You yourself are not using it. She gives the counterexample of people working in the medical field who use a lot of AI and a lot of robots, because they're the ones that are doing it. They're the ones that are actually doing it. So she then looks at this idea of using different technologies in the construction industry. She talks to David from Code Safe Solutions and Jerry from the Union Shop in Australia. And she develops 3 key points about what they were saying about the construction industry. For one thing, it's not just the technology that matters. It's how much it's going to cost. It's how much you can implement it in the actual economic and political world. The second point is that you need to have people's knowledge acknowledged, and that's what enables certain things are going to be adopted and certain things aren't. So we're not going to adopt self-driving cars because that's not part of our work of collaborating with other people. And the third point is that you have to deal with the actual humans. You have to talk to people about why it is that you are implementing this. And so they give the example with the work of Code Safe Solutions. They were incorporating into the construction industry these QR codes to check in and check out. And the workers initially were like, hey, wait a second, we don't like this. It sounds too much like surveillance. And they're like, no, this is actually supposed to be a safety feature. It's supposed to help us all know what's going on. So what she says is that the focus should be on learning and empowerment, not just the technology, not just what technology does in the abstract. at the end of this or throughout, she's talking about what anthropology can do. So it is important that anthropology, we may not want to get techno-dystopian. We don't want to necessarily say all technology is bad, but we do need to say that things can go wrong. There's also an interesting thing that she wanted anthropologists Simi to be more like the engineers. I think that she's saying we should be more fearless, like those confident engineers. I think what she's saying, though, is because sometimes the engineers act like they know everything, but it's based on models in their heads. Whereas what anthropologists can be fearless about or more confident about is that we actually talk to people and we trust the people who are on the ground with their expertise. So I agree with you. I don't think that means we want to become all arrogant and say that we know exactly what's going on. That always gets you into trouble. It's more of shifting the approach toward the people on the ground. Also, anthropology has an understanding of ethical issues and where you might want to use different kinds of technology. What's a bad job that you don't want to do? Removing asbestos. Send in their robots. Actually, this is my favorite example. Dragging pallets around. Manual tasks like dragging pallets around, which could cause injuries. This would save a lot of people getting injuries and that sort of thing without too much of an impact in terms of people's livelihoods and their economics and sustainability. I have to agree with that. I don't think we should have people having to drag pallets around all the time. So this is the CodeSafe website about how they're trying to integrate technology into the QR codes and stuff into creating a safe workplace for people. So our author says again that anthropologists need to not simply study how futures are anticipated and managed, rather we need to do it. Engage it, the meanings, how plausible and realistic they are, how to seek to enable the meanings and the values and sensations that would characterize them. So there you go. It's our goal. Not just going to study, we're going to go out there and do it. We're going to make things happen.